What is going on, all you Pokemon collecting maniacs out there? This is Ryan, the Pika Pika Papa, and today we are going to reignite something that we have not done for quite a while here on this channel, and that is what we used to call Fireside Chats with Pika Pika Papa, and that is a very silly name for videos in the past we did where we just kind of sat down and talked about what's happening in the broader space of the Pokemon collecting and investing hobby. You know, there's always a lot of fun data points and graphs and charts, and I have tons and tons of information that I store in the background and I present to you throughout the course of every single month. But sometimes it's just fun to sit back and have a bit of an opinion piece, which is what today is going to be. Now, this isn't just something that I arbitrarily decided that I wanted to talk about. It was actually spun up because I was reading some articles online, specifically one that was on fortune.com, which was all about Pokemon cards. It was all about what's happening recently in the hobby and how the prices are spiking. And I'll show you the exact article here in a minute. But it kind of made me think that, I've been doing this for a while, not as long as some, but certainly longer than a lot. And if people are brand new into this hobby, there's been a lot of really interesting things that have happened over the last 2 years. The hobby has been at an absolute fever pitch. We've seen a lot of price spikes. We've seen a lot of things that we just haven't seen in the past in terms of supply and demand ratio being out of whack. So I read this article and I thought, man, this would be a really cool opportunity to do a video for new collectors and older collectors alike. Sometimes people like me who've been doing it for a while, like I need a little bit of, I don't know, cold water in the face to kind of wake me up and just say, hey, listen, I know everything's been really exciting here as of late, but there are some risks that are presented here in the hobby. And even though I'm going to present the risks and I'm going to talk about the counterpoints and the reasons why I think Pokemon can certainly overcome all of these risks, it's just really interesting. And I think it's really important sometimes for us to sit back and take a look at these. And I think it's going to be a ton of fun. So the thing that I want to start off right here is this was the article right here from Fortune. And as you can see in the title, not super flattering in terms of those people who are sitting here buying and selling Pokemon cards, but Gen Z men are obsessed with Pokemon cards. They're using boy math to argue that they will beat Nvidia stock and the S&P 500. Now, I know there's a lot of young ladies and women out there who enjoy Pokemon cards as well, so not sure why this guy decided to focus on men, but for the most part, hey, listen, there are a lot of people out there who are saying that Pokemon cards are smashing the S&P 500 and, are absolutely crushing some of the biggest stocks out there. And if you just look at it from a very, very small window, really over the last year or so, it's hard to argue with that. The gains that we have seen here have been absolutely eye-watering. And whenever we talk about that, I always try to layer in, like, this cannot happen forever. It is not natural. It's not going to continue to be this way. Like, it is impossible to see these types of double digit, sometimes triple digit gains on some of these cards and sealed products. It just can't continue for the next 3 to 5 years. Not going to happen. So in some degrees, this individual is right. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of excitement in the market. But then in another degree, like there's also some interesting things that I think present some counterpoints. And we're going to talk about that. So before I start showing you some of these graphs and before we start talking about what I see as some risks and opportunities and some ways that Pokemon's going to prevail, I got to give my selfish plug. If you get into this, if you're having fun, I know we're normally data driven, but we also like to bring a little bit of reality into the space as well. So if you enjoy all of that, hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those two small things go a really long way in helping my small channel out, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So with that out of the way, the next thing that I wanted to highlight was this. And again, this is straight from the article. And this is what I'm talking about just a minute ago when I said these types of gains just simply can't continue forever. So what this is this is from Card Ladder, directly from them. So they track the pricing of cards in multiple different areas, sports cards, TCG cards, et cetera, et cetera. And what this is it shows you the increase in value over the last 20 years from some of the biggest things in the sports card space and also from the Pokemon space, right? And you know that whenever I do my grading card video report, which we do every week, or excuse me, every month, we just did one recently, one of the things that I talk about is ball sports versus Pokemon. One of the reasons I transitioned many years ago from ball sports into Pokemon was because I thought Pokemon had a bigger opportunity for long term. And look at some of these gains that you have seen. None of these are bad gains. Like even the S&P 500, which over the last 20 years, according to this graph right here, is up 421%. Like that is incredible. That is fantastic. It has obviously been a very, very good 20-year run for the stock market. But then when you look at some of these others, these card spaces and what they've done in terms of price appreciation, like Baseball's up 716%. Basketball's up 1,174%. Football, which is where I started. I started my collecting journey. I think it was 23 years ago was when I bought my very first PSA graded NFL Hall of Fame rookie card. It was a Joe Montana PSA 7 1981 Topps card. I will absolutely never forget it. So 23 years ago, I started really collecting and really investing in high-end graded cards, and it was in the football card space. And obviously, football cards have done very well. They're second only to Pokemon, up 1,290%. And as somebody who's been doing this for over 20 years, I can absolutely validate those numbers. I cannot tell you how many slabs I have that I paid $200 or $300 for that are now 5 figures. That is not an exaggeration. It was taking candy from a baby 20-something years ago, and it was just very, very fortunate that the hobby has become so exciting. And now, obviously, I have a really great football card collection, but I also have a very strong Pokemon card collection. If you see here, Pokemon has trounced absolutely everything over the last 20 years, according to Card Ladder. The Pokemon space is up 3,261%, and I think that is very important for all of us to conceptualize and all of us to wrap our heads around, because as I said, and I will continue to say, that can't continue. It's just not going to. It just doesn't make sense, right? Like, there's no way that this will continue to go on for the years ahead. Now, what makes me think that, and why did I want to share some of this with some potential newer collectors, is because not everybody's been doing this as long as everybody else. There are many, many stories about way back in the day. You talk about, the dark ages of Pokemon cards when literally stores couldn't give them away. They were selling them for 50% off, 75% off, like just trying to get them off the shelves. Like, they could not sell them. But then we had a little bit of a resurgence coming in the years of 2020, towards the end of 2020 and 2021. Now, this graph right here is from TCG Fish, and I've used this way in the past, but I do like that website. They don't update their information very often, but what I really want everybody to focus on here, especially those who weren't around for the Pokemon, I don't know, call it the pandemic and the Jake Paul bubble that we went through in late 2020, early 2021, is look at how high those prices got. And that's one of the first things that I'm going to talk about here, is how hype can drive the Pokemon market. Those prices, and this represents the average sale price on eBay for Pokemon cards. And you can see it got to an all-time high back then of about $300. So every transaction that included Pokemon cards in it was going for about $300 on eBay back in that period of time. Like, remember, the pandemic hit, people were stuck in their houses. The supply and demand, again, was way out of whack. Everybody was going back into some of their nostalgia. They were buying Pokemon cards. People were fighting at Target, like very, very eerily similar to what we're going through right now. But look what happened on the back end. Okay, so once the hype started to die down, once things start to normalize a little bit, the prices came crashing down. Now, the blue represents English card prices and the purple represents Japanese card prices. So that's another thing when you talk about hype driving prices. You can see that for a long, long time, all the way through 2022, 2023, like the Japanese cards were selling at a premium versus English cards. And then you can see there on the back end, then it starts to shift. Now we're seeing a space where a lot of the English cards are selling at a premium to Japanese cards. So again, the big call out here is we have been through Pokemon bubbles in the past. And those of you who were not around back then, it was an absolute crazy time. Things got so fever pitched, to be honest, between you and me. Like, I absolutely stopped buying Pokemon cards at that point in time. It didn't make sense to me to do it, because while Pokemon cards were at all-time high, the stock market was at an all-time low. And I talk all the time about take whatever the market's giving you. So instead of spending my money and fighting people to buy Pokemon cards during the pandemic, me and my family, we were spending a lot of our money buying some stocks, which were at all-time lows. So really cool takeaway here. But again, I want everybody to remember, we went through the hype bubble and it dropped about 67%, right? The average sale price during that peak hype bubble there in the pandemic, Jake Paul era, was about $300 per sale. Then it dropped all the way down not long after to $100. So what we're seeing today, remember, we could absolutely see something like this follow in the future. Now, here's what I'm talking about, the risks, volatility. And we talk about volatility a lot here. One of the risks that's driven by the hype-driven market is cards can double in a very short amount of time. It can be because of hype. It can be because of buyouts. We talk about buyouts on TCG Player a lot. And as quickly as that hype grows, it can fade, like we just saw in that graph. So that's a real risk you need to be aware of. And then short-term dominance. We've seen this before. We've seen where certain characteristics, remember when Scarlet and Violet illustration rares got absolutely stupid in terms of pricing, right? It didn't make any sense, but for whatever reason, the hype drove them all the way up. And then consequently, we saw them all come crashing back down. And we've seen it for all kinds of things. things. If you weren't collecting back then, there was a period of time, the reason those Japanese cards were selling at a premium was because there was a huge drive for trainer cards for a while, and everybody was hot and heavy. It didn't matter if it was English or Japanese. Trainer cards were like the bee's knees there for a while. And then guess what happened? The hype faded and the cards dropped back down, okay? And then, as I said, there's past bubbles that we've seen. We've experienced that. We talked about it. We just saw the graph around it. Like, bubbles do happen. And listen, I am not saying that we're in a bubble right now, but everything certainly feels very frothy. Now, what do I think the Pokemon company has in their back pocket to kind of help outsee this is, listen, right now, these cards are designed for scarcity, okay? It is absolutely something that Pokemon Company builds into it. So what drives demand is scarcity, okay? So it's not just hype. Like, hype can be one thing, but scarcity certainly helps drive that. You have alt arts, you have limited promos, you have all kinds of really cool things. And then you got to think about the nostalgia. Yes, hype can drive things up, but what have we seen? We talk on this channel a lot about support lines, how we see prices get all-time high, then they start to drop down, then we wait for them to form support lines, and then we never say when to buy or sell, but support lines have proven to be very interesting buying opportunities, because a lot of times after a collapse, it might take a while, but they will eventually recover. So don't forget, like, there is a very strong nostalgia here. And the other thing that I like about this is, hey, listen, there is a huge collector base for Pokemon cards. And I think the collector base, and again, one of the reasons I transitioned most of my collecting dollars from the sports card space over into the Pokemon space is because of how broad it is, right? Like, there's just collectors for Pokemon cards literally all over the world. So even though this can be a bit of a hype-driven market, I think there's far more upside, there's far more protection to keep it out of the world of just simply hype-driven than anything else. So I really believe that even though hype can drive short-term changes, I think in the long run, everything's going to be just fine. Now, the other thing that I talk about, and I've mentioned this before in the back, is Pokemon cards don't have intrinsic value, okay? You've got sports cards, you've got land that you could be spending your money on, right? You have regular stocks that you could be spending your money on, but instead you and I at this point in time are choosing to spend a lot of our money on Pokemon cards, which really aren't tied to anything. So when you think about it, some of the risk is there's no underlying asset that supports a Pokemon card price. Like, if you buy real estate, you physically have land. You have land, it's yours because you bought it, right? If you buy a stock, you're not just buying a certificate or a number on a screen, you literally own a part of that company. And then for sports cards, at least sports cards are tied to an athlete's performance. Athletes can eventually be enshrined in something like the Hall of Fame, where they are just evergreen legends in the sport. Like, and as morbid as this sounds, like, athletes can die, and believe it or not, when athletes eventually pass away, like, their cards go up in value. Also, the autographs from those sports players, right? Like, those go up in value significantly when a player eventually passes away, because there's going to be no more autographs. So when you think about it, I mean, there are a lot of things that tie into those other three asset classes that we're choosing not to spend our money on. When you think of Pokemon cards, really, it's cardboard and ink. And the thing that I talk about, and I think this is really important, is the only reason a card is worth $10,000 instead of 10 cents is because you and I, in the broader collecting market, we have all agreed that is the price. We talk about scarcity, we talk about in supply and demand, but listen, there are 2 Pika Pika Pawpaw shirts in the entire world. That's it. So when you talk about a scarcity, it is extremely scarce. But guess what? They're not worth anything because nobody out there wants it, though I wish you guys did. I'd love to sell some Pika Pika Pawpaw shirts. That'd be fun. But at the end of the day, scarcity is only one thing, demand is the other, and demand is what's going to drive your prices here. So again, you and I and the rest of the collector base are what determines the value of these cards, because there's really nothing tied to it. And as we've seen, like, there can be a collapse because there's nothing tied to the value of these cards, right? Like, we've seen it with Beanie Babies. And if you weren't around in the mid to late 90s, like late 80s, early 90s, comic books were a huge thing. Everybody was investing in them. Comic books prices were going up. I remember when the end of Superman saga that was going on, my dad and my grandpa literally waited in line to buy the entire series for the death of Superman, right? This was supposed to be a huge investment opportunity. Articles were written about it. Well, the entire comic book market collapsed in the mid to late 90s. So we have seen things like this happen in the past. It is absolutely possible. Now, why do I think the Pokemon Company is going to outperform all of this? It's brand power. I mean, let's be honest here. You cannot argue with the brand power of Pokemon. Pokemon is the #1 media franchise globally. That is compared against Marvel and Disney and Star Wars, and it doesn't matter. You name it, right? Pokemon is #1, and it's not even close. They are #1 by a mile. So when you think about brand power, you cannot compare this to comic books. You can't compare it to Beanie Babies. That was a dumb analogy, right? Like, you just can't, because they are so broad. The other thing that's really cool about Pokemon is they are across multiple different media platforms. You have TCG, you have print, you have clothing, right? You obviously have a large media empire that has cartoons and it has movies and all of that. So when you think about it, I mean, this is just so broad. I don't worry about any of those previous things that we saw from some of those other comparisons in the earlier slide. And the other thing is generational stickiness, right? Listen, fans love Pokemon, and not only that, they pass it down. It doesn't just pass on from parents to kids, but it passes on from kids to parents. Again, another one of the reasons I got into this was because my kids started collecting Pokemon cards, and if they love collecting Pokemon cards, I love collecting Pokemon cards. Nothing brings me more joy than spending time with and bonding with my family. So as soon as they got into this space, I thought, hey, I'm jumping in head first, and that's why we are where we are today. So again, just the ability for everybody to enjoy this hobby, I think far outweighs any risk from no intrinsic value, because even though the cards might not be necessarily tied to anything, I think that the lore, the legends, like all of the, I don't know, all the hype around it, all the different media franchise, like I think that gives it this untangible intrinsic value, if that makes sense. So next thing that we're talking about, and I brought this up again in the past, is lack of big, fresh faces. Like, everybody recognizes the cards right here, but guess what? It has been a challenge for the Pokemon company to kind of break in with new characters, okay? So when we think about this, there is a top-heavy demand. We are still talking about the exact same cards that we were talking about when the Japanese first came out in 1996 and when English first released in 1999. We're talking about Pikachu, we're talking about Charizard, we're talking about Mewtwo, right? Like, all of these exact characters are still the #1 characters in the brand, and new characters do have a tendency to struggle to break through. I mean, every single new generation that comes out blesses us with brand new Pokemon, but rarely do they meet the original fanfare unless there's some type of card mechanic tied to it. Rarely do they meet the type of fanfare that we've seen in the past. And as we just talked about, like, collector preference is what's going to lock in your value, okay? So if there are new Pokemon cards out, no matter how great the artwork is, no matter how cool the mechanics are, like, for a long-term price perspective, if there is not a lot of love for that specific character, when they rotate out, the price is going to go down, or after this generation ends and the next one begins, the price is going to go down. So you really are reliant on some of these big names to continue to carry the franchise. And there is a little bit of risk of franchise stagnation. Like, how long and how many Charizard cards do we need every single year? How many Pikachu cards are we going to need? Like, I'm not going to say it gets redundant, because they do a great job with new artwork, but it is a risk that we need to talk about. Now, the reason why I think it's going to overcome all of this, basically the counterpoint to everything that I just said. Listen, I love the fact that the 151 is still the most popular Pokemon out there. So even though I called it out as a risk, to me, I think it speaks to the ability for this brand to kind of persevere over time. Think about it. Mickey Mouse is still popular, and Mickey Mouse came out in the I don't know, I don't want to quote it, but Mickey Mouse has been around for a very long time, right? Think about Superman, think about Batman, think about all of these big characters that have had the ability to be out here and be a fan favorite for decades and decades on end. So I have no concern about Charizard and Pikachu and their ability to not only survive, but also thrive and continue to really drive this brand. And again, we keep talking about the cross generations. Like, I think that is very, very important. Like, my favorite cards are Gengar and Pikachu, right? And guess what? My daughters organically love Gengar and love Pikachu. Now, they have other Pokemon that they really enjoy, but no matter what, they are always big fans of that. When we go somewhere, they point out Gengar stuff to me. They're like, Daddy, here's a Gengar thing. Like, again, these characters just have the ability to really thrive cross generationally, which I think is really cool. And we do have people who break out. We do have Pokemon cards and characters that come out and they break out. Like, not everything comes from the 151 set. We saw some awesome ones in Gen 5. Like, we've seen, you know, the Evolutions came out after Gen 1. You got Greninja, you got Gardevoir, you got Giratina. Like, the list of big Pokemon that have been able to kind of become a fan favorite after Gen 1. Not as big as Gen 1, but guess what? The list is still broad and there's still plenty out there. And again, you talk about a very strong ecosystem. Pokemon Company International has created it. So I think those are really big call outs, and why I think, you know, Pokemon Company's still in a good spot, even though I wouldn't say they have anybody on the Charizard or Pikachu or Gengar level that's come out quite yet as of late. The other thing that we should talk about, and you might not think this is an issue right now, but talking about market saturation. I know this is a crazy thing to talk about right now with the supply and demand so out of whack, but I promise you, we need to be thinking about that because the Pokemon company, I guarantee you, is working on ways to print more cards. And what is going to happen when the scalper market absolutely dissipates? We've done this before. Back in that 2020, 2021 bubble that was driven by scalpers, they eventually were able to tamp that down. So what is going to happen when they invest all this money in printing more cards and then all of a sudden the demand drops? What's going to happen? So we'll have to wait and see, but I can tell you this, the picture on the left, or at least my left right there, that is of the 1990 football cards. And I lived through this era. I was collecting football cards back then. I was buying packs, so many fond memories of my mom buying me a pack of cards as we're checking out at the grocery store, and I still have them. And the only reason I still have those cards is in case there's a global apocalypse and I need kindling to start a fire for my family to survive, because those cards are literally not worth the cardboard that they're printed on. And that solely happened because of the oversaturation in the market. Now, what do we think? Listen, history does have a tendency to repeat itself for all the reasons that I just said. In the early 80s, early 90s, sports card companies went nuts in terms of producing, and that produced the junk wax era, which I was just referring to. And then again, the Pokemon company isn't immune. We saw it happen. Go on Reddit. This is a fun exercise. Go on Reddit, and if you look for Shining Fates Elite Trainer boxes, you will find articles that were written on Reddit from 4 or 5 years ago, and people are just absolutely losing their mind because Shining Fates ETBs are going for like $150. Every store is sold out of Shining Fates. Well, if you were collecting not long after that, you'll know that Pokemon Company printed that in Battle Styles and Vivid Voltage, right? And then we got to a point where they could not give it away. You were buying Shining Fates ETBs at a huge discount, and the market for Shining Fates absolutely crashed, as with Battle Styles, which I still think is a great set, but neither here nor there. Like, that is a real opportunity. Just like I said, there will be a point where the scalpers aren't able to make money on this because the demand and supply comes into a better line, but that does not mean the Pokemon company is going to print less. So we will, at some point, I don't know when, have this period where the supply is much higher than the demand. So we need to be aware of that. And the other thing is, and I talked about this, if you didn't watch my most recent grading video, you absolutely should, because this is critically important and it matters. And that's the fact that we are seeing more grading volume at PSA for TCG cards than we've ever seen before. We have seen 4 consecutive months where over 950,000 TCG cards have been graded at PSA. To put that in perspective, for 4 consecutive months, over 60% of everything that has been sent to PSA grades cards, they grade ticket stubs, they grade literally anything. 60% of everything that's come through PSA's doors has been TCG cards. That is a fundamental shift in terms of volume in the grading card market, and it's something we should be aware of. Now, why do I think they can do it? Pokemon Company has proven in the past that they can punch the brakes when they need to. We have seen that happen. So they were able to get Sword and Shield era back under control. Now, we did see a lot of stuff available at the Pokemon Center for a long time at MSRP, so it took them a while to kind of pump the brakes and pull back the printing plates a little bit, but they have shown a willingness to do that. The other thing is, people talk about the junk wax era all the time. So the Pokemon Company is very, very aware of what happened to all of those sports card brands in the 90s. And I promise you, they do not want that to happen again. I guarantee you that they are keeping one eye on the present and one eye on the future. They don't want to oversaturate the market so everything crashes, but they also don't want us to live in the world where we do now, where nobody can get the cards, right? So I think that's a big, big thing. The other thing about market saturation is it is globally distributed. And again, I think that's very important to understand, that these cards are going all over the world. So it's very, very hard to saturate the entire world with Pokemon cards. I think the demand is going to be there. I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I don't think the Pokemon Company is going to fall into the junk wax era like I had to live through in the 1990s. I hope nobody has to go through that. It was really, really sucky, to be honest with you. And the final thing that I'm going to talk about here, and I don't even have any negatives because I just don't think it exists, but there are always risks of an overall brand collapse. Every single company that you see featured here were at the top of their game. They were at the pinnacle at some point in time, and they subsequently lost it. Toys R Us was just unbelievable early in the day. Again, so many fond memories of going to Toys R Us. Bankrupt. Fleer was one of the big 3 sports card companies. Again, there were many different people who printed sports cards back in the day. Fleer was one of the top 3. To be the top 3 in the sports card space is just like climbing Mount Olympus. It's absolutely crazy. But despite all of that, guess what? They went out of business. How about Blockbuster? Had a monopoly on their space, out of business. Atari, out of business. Midway Games, which brought us Mortal Kombat, NBA Jams, all of these huge franchises, absolutely gone. Now, why do I think Pokemon Company's in a very, very safe spot? Most importantly for me, out of all I have listed here, is the fact that TCPI is unique. It is not just an individual company. It's backed by Nintendo, it's backed by Game Freak, it's backed by Creatures. So you have 3 different parent companies that all have their fingers in TCPI, which I think gives it a whole lot of stability, and you're going to get different opinions. And I think that that is one of the biggest feathers in the cap for Pokemon long term. The other thing is, listen, diversification. I talked about this earlier. Like, each of these companies that failed were very, very singularly focused in what they did. Pokemon does everything, but from cards to artwork to video games to media. Like, Pokemon Company is so diverse. I have no issues. I don't think they're going to collapse whatsoever. The other thing, there's a lot of revenue stability through all of those different franchises as well. And also, listen, I say this all the time, Pokemon is still in its infancy, but compared to some of these other brands, Atari was only around 12 years. Blockbuster was only around 29 years. Like, now that we're starting to get some age behind Pokemon, every year that goes by, they continue to be stronger and stronger, and they continue to have a better and better chance, for long-term prosperity. So that was a whole lot. This was a very long video. I don't even know how long it was, but I enjoyed the heck out of shooting it. I hope you enjoyed the heck out of watching it. I hope you agreed with some of this, and I also hope you disagreed with some of it, because it's really great to get others' opinions on all of that as well. I hope you have an epic rest of your day. If you had fun, if you enjoyed the content, we're going to get back to the data stuff soon, but hit that subscribe button or give us a thumbs up. Those 2 small things go a long way in helping me out. Can't tell you how much I appreciate it, but most importantly, have an epic rest of your day. All right, talk to you later, everybody. See you. Bye.